Hi, my name is Stefan Olsen. I'm a junior biochemistry and biomathematics double major, and I'm going to be discussing today a little bit about my research opportunities and the importance of conducting research as a pre-health professional. So the first thing I'd like to discuss is the research that I began to participate in as a freshman, and I've continued up until this point. So my research experience has basically been threefold. I began as a freshman working under Dr. Foley in a biochemistry lab, and I began conducting research on the correlation between certain physiological stressors and psychological stressors and particular biomolecules that we could identify that might correlate between those two things in the brain. So I started to do this research. I conducted research over the summer. I transformed my research from a brain redox biochemistry focus to one that's focused on the redox of cancer cells and the processes that are involved in those. So I began looking at the influence of arsenicals on cancer cell proliferation and how cancer cells might be influenced or their proliferation might be impeded by treatment with arsenical compounds. So I began looking at organic arsenicals. Organic arsenicals have been used to treat some sorts of cancer, including leukemia and those particular liquid cancers, as they're known as. So I began research on those compounds, and the idea is that cancer cells exhibit a certain metabolic characteristic that are different than those of normal cells. So a lot of research has been conducted on the genomic instability of cancer cells. But my focus has been on a metabolic point of view, where cancer cells emphasize certain metabolic characteristics, including uptake of glucose, increased reliance on glycolysis, decreased reliance on mitochondrial respiration. So the idea was, we know that based on my own experiments, that cell proliferation can be inhibited by treatment with organic arsenicals. The question is why? And I hypothesized, along with other research members in my group, that, well, organic arsenicals have a preference for attacking thiols within cells, or in proteins, I should say. And those attacks on thiols can inhibit protein function. We know, based on experiments that I've conducted more recently, that organic arsenicals can bind to particular glycolytic enzymes. So the hypothesis is that, well, if we inhibit glycolytic enzymes, we can prevent cell proliferation and thereby preferentially attack cancer cells instead of normal cells. So I began doing research on these sort of compounds. I ran an experiment to identify the particular proteins and enzymes that a representative organic arsenical known as phenylarsine oxide, and that's actually shown on the screen, can bind to particular glycolytic enzymes. So I identified those proteins. I then shifted the focus of my research. I became interested in physical chemistry and methods of computational chemistry that could be used to identify binding interactions. So using a yeast model of metabolic proliferation of cancer cells, I identified the proteins, and now I'm in the process of identifying the binding interactions between this organic arsenical and these proteins that I've identified using computational software. So my research has evolved over the years that since I began conducting it as a freshman, and I've had the opportunity at the University of Scranton to transform my research from one field, kind of a neuroscience, biochemistry field, to biochemistry proteomics, and now most recently to a computational point of view. And then following these particular experiments, I intend to identify the types of enzyme inhibition that we might be able to see using these metabolic compounds. So that's a little bit about how I have been conducting research, what I've been doing, what I've been involved with. But I think the next question that you might have is, how did I become involved in research? So as a freshman, I had the opportunity, I was very interested in biochemistry. I began reading articles in redox biochemistry in the brain. I began reading articles in redox biochemistry on cancer. I even shadowed some students in the lab, and I had the opportunity to kind of meet students who worked for Dr. Foley to kind of get an idea of what they did and what they might have their interests in. And having done those interactions, I realized that I enjoyed doing those things as well. So I applied for a scholarship over the summer. I ended up getting the grant, and I had the opportunity as a freshman to get involved in something that I knew very little about. Specifically, I hadn't even taken organic chemistry. I kind of had to dive right into research. So, my experiences in research so far. My research is focused on a holistic, systematic, and procedural method of studying scientific procedures and methodology. I've had the opportunity to kind of submerge myself in my research. So from a very early point in my career at the University of Scranton, I was able to dive into the research, really understand and learn the details from the students in the lab, from Dr. Foley, that a lot of other students probably don't have at different schools, where you wouldn't be able to pursue research experiences throughout the semester, throughout the summer, and really learn things that you wouldn't learn in the classroom and be able to apply it. So then the question becomes, what's fun about doing research? So I've had the opportunity to pursue a whole bunch of different things, and I've learned that there's two main things I think are really fun about doing research. One is you get to make a contribution to the field. You get to contribute to biochemistry and medicine if those are the things that you really enjoy. And secondly, you get to learn and problem solve and focus on things that are skills you wouldn't ordinarily learn from a classroom. They're things that you would have to learn from your hands-on experience in a research laboratory. I think the biggest challenges about conducting research are, one, staying on top of the literature. It can be a bit difficult to stay on top of it all at the same time while trying to conduct your classwork. But it's something that's really important because it's going to help down the road when you're focusing on exams and things before applying to pre-professional exams and the MCAT or DAT or GRE. All those exams focus on research-based work. And secondly, it can be difficult to find lab time, time to get into the lab, do work. But I think over the years I've had the opportunity to kind of balance those two things, to find the opportunity to get into the lab, learn things from an experimental point of view and observe how biochemistry works, and then learn how to apply it from the classroom. I think the last thing that I'd like to talk about is, as a pre-professional student, why do research? So a lot of students might, and me included when I was a freshman, I perceived research as being something I just had to get through. It was a hurdle, something that I could say that I contributed to. And I think a lot of students who are pre-professional and desire to pursue a health professional degree agree with that perspective. However, having participated in research, I quickly learned that there's some very important skills and observations that you make from conducting research that you can't learn in a classroom. And those skills are multifold. So conducting research allows you to develop question-making skills, to pursue interests, to learn the biochemical and the medical field, and specifically to learn how to contribute to that field. So when you're conducting research, you're looking at solving questions that are unexplained. And those are things that health professionals do on an everyday basis. When you go to a physician or you go to a dentist, they're looking at a problem and they're trying to solve it. And that's incredibly important for being a student who intends to pursue those positions. Secondly, you're learning to contribute to the field of biochemistry, medicine, biology, neuroscience. You have the opportunity to learn that point of view that you wouldn't have if you hadn't participated in research. You essentially get the the opportunity to pursue and develop a understanding of what it's like to conduct research in those fields. You get to learn where medical pathologies come from, how drugs and treatments are developed. And that perspective is incredibly important for being someone who's going to pursue a health professional degree. And lastly, what I think is most important, you get to develop your critical thinking skills and your problem-solving skills. Two things which, as I mentioned before, are incredibly important for pursuing a health professional degree, because those are skill sets that are going to be used on a daily basis and things that you wouldn't learn in a classroom alone. And it's for those reasons that I have found that research is incredibly important and an excellent experience for undergraduate students who intend to pursue that sort of professional degree. I want to thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy pursuing future research interests.